But as I thought like that and wanted to start reading more into this, into the other literature, I was just hit by this sickening, dark, ugly feeling. It was like a wall of darkness. It just hit me. My first thought was that the sickening, dark feelings was because I was sickened to find out that the GBC had misled us all these years. But that sickening feeling got more intense when I tried to read any further into the Ritwik Ross literature. It was so intense that I just had to stop reading. It was late at night, so I put this aside until the next day. Still, I was left feeling that the whole Guru issue had been nothing but a big lie perpetuated by the GBC. No wonder I felt this dark, sickening feeling. But the next day, the same thing happened. The more I tried to dig deeper and study this issue any further, the more dark the feelings came. I just couldn't go any further. I then thought, actually, the GBC had declared that this literature was poisonous. I began to wonder if that wasn't why I was experiencing such dark feelings. When the Ritwik Ross issue, was the Ritwik Ross issue really that deviant and poisonous that just by reading this, it was creating such dark, sickening feelings? Or was it because I had just found out that the GBC were really lying to us all these years? Or they were just so mistaken and gave wrong information? I decided to speak with someone who I knew supported the GBC side. I was at the Los Angeles Temple, so I spoke to Savas, the temple president for Los Angeles. I told him I had just read for the first time the July 9th letter and that I was deeply disturbed by what I found. His immediate response was, Ami Atma, you've been reading that Ritwik poison, haven't you? That was a rather peculiar statement, actually, because all I had told him was that I had read Srila Prabhupada's letter. Why was he calling Srila Prabhupada's letter poisonous? I mean, to me, that statement sounded like the actual poison. But anyway, he may have assumed I had been reading more than this, but at the time, that was really as far as I had got. Anyway, but I told him that since 1978, the GBC had told us in their official paper, written, that in this letter, this July 9th letter, that Srila Prabhupada said these men would have become actual gurus on his disappearance. I was referring to that statement I just presented, and I told him it doesn't state that in the letter at all. So I said, were the GBC just lying to us? I mean, they told us that when Srila Prabhupada appointed these 11 men, that he said they would become regular gurus and initiate their own disciples on his disappearance. And they said it was written in that letter. And that's not what the letter states. Savas said, Prabhu, you've been poisoned by reading that literature. Again, the only thing I was asking about was Srila Prabhupada's letter. What Srila Prabhupada wrote. What Srila Prabhupada wrote is not poison. Anyway, I was still open to hear what he had to say, but Savas assured me that the July 9th letter, what's stated there can only be applied to while Srila Prabhupada was living. After that, these men were to become regular gurus. And that is what he had given as a verbal instruction at the May 28th meeting. So let me state right here that up to that point, I had never researched this issue for myself. The only thing I had read up to that point that was given to me from the Ritwik Ross camp was just the July 9th letter. On retrospect, looking back at what he told me, I now see that his statement that this July 9th letter can only be properly understood when we add it to what Srila Prabhupada verbally instructed the GBC on May 28th, is not entirely true. Well, the two things are somewhat interdependent, just not in the way he thought it was or the GBC was saying it is. The July 9th letter itself was carefully written by Srila Prabhupada and was to have been sent out to all of the temples in July of 1977. The GBC disobeyed that instruction by Srila Prabhupada and never sent it out. But that letter and its contents is what Srila Prabhupada wanted his disciples to read and to know. Srila Prabhupada didn't state in that letter that he had instructed, that what he had instructed in this letter was not a complete instruction in and of itself. That you can't take, he didn't state in that letter, you can't take this, what I'm stating in this letter all by itself, and that you can only understand what I have just written here only when you combine it with what the GBC think I said on May 28th. Again, that letter Prabhupada wrote for us to read. It contained the information that he wanted us to read and understand at that time. And it wasn't written with the idea that it was an incomplete instruction. It was written as a complete instruction for us to read by Srila Prabhupada. Again, this point will be covered in more detail in the chronological timeline section. But as I said, when Savas was speaking to me in 1996, I didn't know any of that. And when he told me this, that I could only take that letter, I could not take that letter by itself, that it could only be understood by combining it with what Srila Prabhupada had verbally said, or what the GBC thought he had verbally said at the May 28th meeting. At the time, that sounded reasonable to me. And I was open to accept what Savas was saying. But another major problem was, which I also didn't realize at the time, was that he was just telling me, like I just said, he was just telling me what the GBC thought Srila Prabhupada had said, or supposed, at that meeting. I hadn't seen transcripts of the May 28th meeting yet. So I had no idea what Srila Prabhupada actually said in that meeting. But when Savas told me that Srila Prabhupada had stated in that meeting that these men that he was selecting as Ritviks were to become actual gurus on his disappearance, I assumed and accepted this must have been what he actually said. And so at the time I accepted what Savas was telling me and accepted it as an actual fact.